Okay, chapter 2. It says here, family dynamics, values, support, influence, and expectation. So family dynamics. So I grew up, in suburbia. Nothing really special. Well, I shouldn't say nothing really special because every family is very special. But I definitely have an appreciation of maybe finer things because I didn't really have all the finer things in life. Actually, I've got a guitar over there. I'm embarrassed probably to show. I actually got Mum's alfoil out. You want me to show it?
Uh-huh.
So here's my very first guitar. Ooh, rock and roll. There we go. So, because I didn't have any money, I actually got Mum's alfoil out and put it inside the guitar. So when I play really fast, this actually heats up and I can cook potatoes. No, I'm just joking. No, it doesn't do that at all. But anyway, and here's another thing, like I just hacked and sawed that when I was a kid, So this guitar's been all over the place when I was in the original music scene, and ergonomics. I'm a fan of ergonomics, so this is where it all started. But anyway, so family values. So my mum actually helped me play. I don't know why I'm touching my phone. Sorry. My mum actually, would you believe it, taught me how to play lead guitar. It's quite funny because I actually these days I'm a bit of a shredder. But back in the day, Mum can play anything she heard, and back then I didn't really appreciate what she actually had. She had an ear for music, so she played, in orchestras and violin. So a violin has no frets. So I'm just saying how this relates to influence from family is that, Mum had an ear. So I was like, oh, I want that. And also my grandmother, I didn't really appreciate this until I became a music teacher and I went to the, music education school, blah, 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 blah. Did a jazz degree and I'm an instrumental teacher and a music teacher by day, blah, blah, blah. My grandmother probably had so much to do with me as a musician. I'll tell you why. My nana would show me something on the piano because there was a piano in her house, and then she would show me something like once or twice. She was English, and then she would go to the kitchen, and then she'd start doing her dishes, and she would say, "Play it louder." It was like that was the first thing, loud and proud. Because being a music teacher now, this is gold. Because if you play with commit, you focus on tone, and if you focus on tone, that comes with confidence. And then you can really do what you do loud and proudly. And the second thing was, I copped, why can't you do that? Like, what's going on? Can't you hear that? Can't you hear that? And so thinking about it now and reflecting on it with a new skill set, going to university and all this kind of business, not that that means anything, but just analysing it, that's where Mum got it from. Was from my grandmother. Expectation, excellence, excellence, excellence. So, and I was exposed to that as well, when Nana used to look after us. And so, talking about family dynamics is, it's really, really cool. So maybe to suggest, if you can, post all this COVID business, hang out with your grandparents because they've got 2 generations of experience. And you may not understand till later the goal that they do. So remember, action comes with thought, and sometimes, we've been exposed to people's actions, but we don't understand where the thinking is. And so, so if I look at my Nana and her expectation of me about getting it right within very, very quickly, she expected an ear from me. So, and, I got roasted. If you go and play in front of Nana, you need to make sure you have it all together. But then I think about, where did that come from? She came from England, so her piano teachers, Nana was born in 1930, so we're talking 1940s, up until she was 10, she was getting lessons, in the 1940s, what was around then, the records were just starting out. So the lineage, so all I'm saying is just being aware of lineage. So she would sit down and play along with records or whatever, and she would read the music, and her teachers she's involved with, that taught her, they were around, 20 years before that, the turn of the century, so this is amazing stuff. I love this stuff, so even what I do now is I'm standing on the shoulders of other people. So it took me a little while to appreciate that, from my grandmother and my mum, and then influence from my auntie. her and my uncle, I borrowed this Deep Purple record. It was called, it had all the heads on it. Oh, what's it called? With all the, I'll have to come back to you. It's got all the heads on it, and Rushmore. It's called Rushmore, Deep Purple. Anyway, it was my favourite record to listen to. Richie Blackmore got really influenced that. Anyway, I was keeping it safely underneath this thing on the cupboard, and the cat spewed on it, and I was so pissed off. I couldn't play the record because all this cat spew was like flicking off on the wall and stuff. So, rock and roll. There's a tip. Don't let your cats near your records. Anyway, I was influenced with that. So just listening library, because back in those days there was no. I didn't even have tapes. Back in those days, and then when I did start playing guitar, I would sit in with my auntie because she could sing and play, and then she was like, "Stop playing the same rhythm. Stop playing the same rhythm." And there's that same expectation that came from her mum, because this is my mum's sister. So it's really interesting. And the other thing is, I was exposed to a lot of family bands and stuff back in those days, and that you probably don't really take it on board, but everything you're exposed to early in your life comes out later in life. And I guess now, just being appreciative of that, and more family values. My father, he's a mechanical engineer, genius, I would say. He invented a lot of things, and I'm not joking. He had a lot to do with back in the late 70s with airbag suspension of the truck sitting on the chassis, pioneering all that. He was the head draftsman for a Queensland trucking company called Leader Trucks. Like, he was it. He got a Caterpillar engine and put it in an Australian-made truck. Sadly, the company went under, but then he went to work for Mac, and blah blah blah. So I think that really influenced me about excellence, because if you're going to do anything for Dad, it has to be like times 10 to the power of 5, plus infinity. So that really influenced me. Other things that influenced me for support, I used to literally jam in my garage, and I grew up across the road, and this guy, I'm just being guitar related here obviously because we're in my studio, Phil Wright, bless his soul, he's now passed on. The first time I met Phil, he was technically outside, but I'll tell you why in a second. He came running down and bashed on my garage door, well, Mum and Dad's garage door, and I opened up the garage door and I thought it was the cops, because I was like cranking it, and I was like really slowly, hello, and there's Phil in his dick togs, and it's like, he wasn't a small man either. I mean, actually, I'm not even going to elaborate on that, but anyway, it was kind of awkward, and he goes, "Is that you playing the guitar?" And I was like, "Yeah," and he goes, "Well, tune it." And I had no idea Phil was a jazz master guitarist. He played around, he also played bass. He exposed me to jazz and complex playing. So how did this influence and support me in my musical journey? Is hanging around people that just melted me, like just blew me off the planet. Like, his jazz guitar chops were just mind-blowing. And they say everything happens for a reason, whether you believe that or not. But for me, to be exposed to this kind of tech when I was just a teenager, like, oh man, you mean there's like 5 versions of C major? Like, wow. And I actually met Dave Brubeck. So if those jazz heads know who Dave Brubeck is, he was a composer, and he gave me some tips back in the day. But family related, I'm just saying, this jazz compositional dude, guru, was in my garage telling me what to do as a teenager. Like, back then, I didn't really know any different. I didn't even know who Dave Brubeck was. But if you look him up, he is no slouch. He's a legend. And it just goes, I don't know, maybe opening your eyes to what influences everyone's exposed to, that really shaped it. And expectations, I think, yeah, I don't know, my family, well, Dad's Dutch. His grandfather was a tailor to the Dutch Queen. And so expectations are really high, because, when you think about it, when he was a kid, he probably went and saw Granddad. His granddad was hanging out the palace. So, that makes sense why he's like, he doesn't talk to you, he just smacks you over the back of the head and say, get your elbows off the table, like, different expectations. So yeah, like, seriously, from I don't know. It's cool now thinking about it, but back then I didn't really know. And the other thing about values is I didn't really understand this until something horrific happened in my life. Dad went through PTSD, a Vietnam vet. Cool. Yet did something traumatic. Cool. It was very controversial. They came back. Blah blah blah. And I think it wasn't until the late 80s or early 90s actually, like the whole Australian government said, "Yep, cool, we acknowledge." But the point is, Dad was going through some kind of PTSD. Was I exposed to that as a kid? Probably, or maybe I should say yes. But that really shaped, like, being aware of the psychological things. Like as I said before in chapter one, I have a massive interest in why people do things, and just being aware of actions. They say people show you everything through their action, not just what they say. Anyone can, talk the talk, but do they walk the walk? Yeah. Anyway, that was that one. A little bit, and it's chapter 2 here. Interests and passions growing up that are integrated into your life now. Well, I think that I got into martial arts really, really early on in life, and I just enjoyed the improvisation of it. Other things that, once you learn your moves or whatever. And another thing that really influenced my life is I played clarinet actually. So a lot of people don't know that actually because I tried to bury it. But I actually got lessons from, what was his name? Rob or Rick or something. Anyway, this guy who actually played on American warships. So he actually played on American warships at the end of World War One or Two. His name was Mick. I can't remember what wars he was exposed to, but he played on aircraft carriers. And all the stuff that I pass on now to like kids playing streetwise musicianship, I kid you not, that's all the stuff I learned from Mick. He had things like this. This would mean 4 flats, or this would mean 2 sharps. So he had this whole non-verbal communication. It was all just hand signs. Why? Because he was playing a horn. He was playing a horn, and he would say, next song is going to be 4 flats. Cool. I'm going to start on the 2. I think chords were that way. Yeah, sharps were that way and chords were that way. So yeah, like mind blowing, but another way of communicating from guys who he played on aircraft carriers, and there's like over 10,000 people on the aircraft carrier. So he was an entertainer, even though he went to all the wars. He wasn't, on the front line or whatever, but his role was important to make sure people don't go out of their minds on the ships, like in the middle of the ocean for months and months and months. Think about it, the psychology, the amount of people that might be scarred from going to war, not just because they're on the front line, is because they are actually isolated. Technically, what we're doing now, right? So, yeah, that actually blew my mind. But anyway, about the clarinet, he taught me how to improvise because I said, "Oh, where's the music?" He goes, "What do you need that for?" I mean, don't get me wrong, he was a massive reader as well, but he agreed and amplified the skills that I was already learning to play by ear, and he also taught me something called MFA, which is Mother Truck and Attitude. Right? So whatever you do, if you don't do it with 100% conviction, it's a waste of time. So, but it's funny because he was of the same generation of my grandmother, but he came from America, so I actually got tutored by an American dude from playing on American warships, and I got tutored from my grandmother from an English side, so it's kind of cool, it's like really, really cool when you deep dive on the lineage, of what all these musical concepts, they're all coming together, and then they're the same because it's what is music? It's about being happy and connected, right? So, interests and passions growing up. So I mentioned the martial arts, and I'll maybe unpack that a little bit more. And I think other passions was learning. I went to university to study IT, and I walked past the music hall, and I was like, "Oh, cool! They're playing like big band jazz in there." And I was sort of exposed to that living across the road from Phil Wright. And he went in there and said, "Hey, can I have a go?" As everyone does. And they said, "Yeah, cool." So I had a go. I played bass, I think, there. And so within 2 weeks, long story short, they said, "Hey, what are you doing this date?" I was international touring. I was actually got in this band, this big band. It was a 25-piece big band, and we went overseas to Hong Kong, and we did 3 shows a day. That was the most intensive touring I've ever done, because it was like, oh, we're here. Okay, cool. We're playing. Excellent. Oh, we're packed up. Now we're unpacking again. Oh, we're here. Oh, cool. We're packed up. Oh, and now we're here again. Now we better unpack and so that was pretty insane, and yeah, a lot of great memories, but not just the trip, but expectations. So getting back to interest and passions, just understanding that influence on my life now. I want to make the happy memories and get the music done, and the work ethic, if that makes sense. And other interests, I think I already mentioned motorcycling, and I think art. As I get older, I think you may have seen some art upstairs, but yeah, I really appreciate art. Yes, it's 2D, so that you see the whole thing now, but music is not 2D. Music is an experience base, and I love music. I love actually, even now these days, like putting on a Pink Floyd record, but from beginning to end, and the Beatles and stuff. Some people hate it, whatever. That's cool, but I really appreciate the decisions that have gone into putting the record together. Now, and some of them are concept records. I mean, I've got my own concept record over here. I'll unpack it later, but this is a concept record. So if you want to experience this, you have to listen to it from beginning to end. It's because I spent a lot of time. I spent 2 years putting it together, so it's an experience. And other interests, I think, being how do I say, learning to be alpha of your own self. Now this is deep, and sometimes it's not politically correct, just being honest. And probably the hardest lesson I learned to be alpha is of your own self. I'm not talking about going in a room and alphaing a room, but to be alpha with your time and your energy, because the most important or the most expensive thing anyone has is their time. So if you can't, I don't know, be aware of your time, and don't get me wrong, look, there's some people I can't alpha. Like, when I say that, I mean like with your mum. You're not going to say, hey, gotta go, or whatever, you like own the time. But these days I appreciate the time more than ever. But I'm talking about doing things that are probably not going to be conducive to the best outcome for you. So, choose your friends. I'm writing to Dan Pena right now, so London Real is an awesome podcast. It's happening. And so I'm just saying what I'm into right now. It's influenced me my whole life. It's about how to be better. And I'm not talking about just music, because music, you should learn music because the skill set that goes along with it applies to everything. Because you suck, very beginning. I mean, you really suck, doesn't matter. Pick a new genre and you'll be really bad at it, right? Then you get better, then you understand the mechanics, but then you find a mentor, right? Once you go, hey, I really like that music, I want to look at Led Zeppelin, and that's just a brand, right? Then you want to go, who is the brand? Jimmy Page. So making it personal mentor. So getting back to London Real, which is Brian Rose. I've never met Brian Rose, but I like his work. I like what he does. Anyway, getting back to Dan Pena, the very colourful character he has on that show. He says this saying, show me your friends and I will show you your future. So if you think about that, everyone is supposed to be the collective mindset of the 5 people they hang around with, right? So just reflect for a second. Who have you spent your time on? Think about it. I was a fixer. I used to spend time in fixing people who that just drained me and sapped me. And I was like, I'll fix that one now. Bring on the next, and I try and fix that. So being alpha is being aware of that, and maybe you don't have to do that. I'm not saying don't do that, seriously, because the next story I'm going to bring up, I needed help as well. So I'm just saying, just being aware. If you're aware of something, then you can go there if you have to, or not go there. As like driving on the road. If you know there's a pothole there, you can avoid it at choice of will. So, yeah, I really hope that I've unpacked that a little bit, but it's really interesting to me about who I hang around with, hence why you're here, so which is really cool, Michelle. So yeah, passions, that's my passions, is keep, just being aware, that's a passion. So that was chapter 2.